In this sixth model probe tutorial, we're going to look at making changes in the model, transmitting those back to the designer, and getting updates from the designer back into the model probe model. In this tutorial, we're going to look at what happens when the spec writer looks at a model and then discovers that there are things that he thinks needs correcting or changing in the model. How does he feed that back to the spec writer? So in this case, I've opened the model and I've pulled up. You notice I'm in the group assignment tab. That's the way we can do this. And when I'm in the group assignment tab, I can click on any of these columns. For example, I can click on the ironmongery setting here and double click on it, and it will come up and allow me to type a new value. If I was looking at a value, let me just pull another one up here. Pull up is external. So is external excuse me, is a binary value. So if I can double click on it to bring it up, and it will warn me that this is varied, so I'm going to change all the instances of it. And again, I now get a true false choice that I could change here. If I was trying to change a keynote or an assembly code, then it would be a drop-down list appropriate for that. I can also go through and select everything in a column and say edit that, and the value would change all those values for all those types in those columns. So I've got various ways I can edit them. Just going to go back to the ironmongery one here, and I'm going to type in a new value here. Door handle. There we go. Okay, and save that. So again, notice that when I make a change, it's the same as before. When I change the keynote, now the value in here is shown purple, so that I can see that I've made a change. At some point, I'm going to want to, so I'll just save those changes first of all. At some point, I'm going to want to feed that information back to the designer. And the way I do it is this. I go over here under the File menu and I pick Export Changes To, and it just was looking for a file on the disk. So I'm just going to save that file to the disk. And yes, there's an existing one, so I'm going to replace it. That text file that I just saved, I can then send over to the designer. He may be in a different company, maybe on a different floor. Could be the same person, of course, which is the case that I'm going to show you right now. But typically, the spec writer and the designer are two separate people. And Model Probe doesn't allow the spec writer to make changes directly in the BIM model itself. You can make changes within Model Probe and then feed them back to the designer to check. So let's flip back to Revit here, and under Revit I've installed the add-in for Spec Edit. So if I go to add-ins, it's there under Spec Edit. Import model updates. If I can say the words, it would work better. And I'm just going to import that, grab that text file that I just created. And this brings me up a list of all of the elements based on the instances of them. There's their IDs, so you can look them up by their IDs, the type that they are, their element names, the parameter. So most of these cases are keynote parameters that I've changed from the automated assignment, and it shows the value that's currently in the model, the new value that is going to be put in, and any notes. Now you'll notice that on this particular type, the door ironmongery is not a parameter that can be set on this door. So they're highlighted in red so that I can see that they've been changed. If any of these values had already been changed, in fact, let me just do that. Let me just select some values here to be changed. And change those and say apply those changes. So I just check the ones that I want to apply and apply them. And you'll notice they go gray. So if anything in the change list has already got the same value in the model, if the designer's already made that change, then they'll just show up as gray because they're already done. The values are the same. But for the rest of these, they need to get done as well. And these ironmongery ones, I can't change the red. So I'm just going to select them all to be changed and say apply that to the model. And as you can see, this takes a little while for Revit to walk through and make all those changes. And we're done. So I can click done when I'm finished with that. Now again, I'm at the point where I need to export from my model back to the designer. Periodically, the designer is going to have updates to the model, and he's going to export them and bring them in. So that's the next stage that I want to show you here. So the designer has saved a new version of the model, and so to bring a new version of the model in, I'm just simply going to go to File again, Update Model, and pick the new updated IFC file that the designer has created and sent me. I'll give it a minute for that to come in, and it says that there are 4 conflicts. So the problem can be if I've updated some values in the in Model Probe and changed them, and then the designer either makes similar changes himself and chooses different values, or if he rejects some of the suggestions I've sent to him, and so on. We'll get conflicts in this case, so I need to resolve those. So that in that case, it warns me that there are conflicts. I go over to the conflicts tab, and again it tells me that the type of element, the element classification, its type, the property involved, the old value, the new value, since these were rejected, and the old user value. And I can decide for each one of these. I can decide that I want to forget the change, forget the old user value, or keep the old user value, or undecided means it's not going to do anything. I'm just going to do it quite easily here. I'm going to say keep all of those changes and apply them. That takes them out of the conflicts list because I've already dealt with them. And if I go back to doors, of course, and pick that value, I've kept the value in there. Another thing worth noting when I've brought in a change to the model is if I look at the property matrix, I would see that there was a yellow triangle that indicated something has changed in that element, and so I may need to open the paragraphs that or tables that I had before, click OK to which will put a copy of them on the clipboard, and then paste them back into the appropriate section. So what I've shown here is that we can make changes to the model for the specification purposes, transmit those changes back to the designer in a format that he can either accept or reject them and apply them, and also how we can get an updated model from the designer, bring it into a Model Probe, and then see what things it's affected, what paragraphs I may need to change because they'll be marked with a little yellow triangle, and any place where there's a conflict between what the designer and the spec writer are doing, and they can argue about what the right resolution is, but they have to work through that process on their own. And that's the end of this tutorial.